Hi, welcome back. In the last video, we talked about crop budgets and how the summary page was designed to help a farmer choose the crops to grow. It was all about contribution margin, the higher the better. Now when we switch over to the overhead page, we want to discuss how efficient a farm is. In this case, the lower the better. Efficiency is measured by the overhead cost on a per acre basis. When we calculate the break-even prices and yields of each crop, we add crop input cost to overhead cost and divide the bushels per acre. Overhead cost, or the cost of farming, affects your break-evens just as much as input costs do. Let's take a look. Here's an example of a farm that is getting 50 bushels an acre. And so when we take the inputs of $270 an acre, it's going to be the same for all three of these farms at $5.40 a bushel. However, these three farms have different overheads, $150, $200, or $250 an acre. If you were to calculate the break-evens for farm A, it's $8.40 a bushel to break even, $9.40 for B, and $10.40 for C. Each $50 increase in overhead is a dollar per bushel increase in break-even price. Let's take that one step further. If the market prices are at $14, we're making money, but the profit for the farmer A is $5.60, whereas in farmer C is only $3.60. Their profit on a per acre basis is $280 down to $230 or $180. So profit decreases by $50 an acre every $50 in overhead. So every dollar of overhead reduces profit by a dollar. That's why I call the overhead per acre cost a measure of efficiency. Overhead is sometimes referred to as a fixed cost because many of the costs don't change from year to year. For example, accountant fees, farm insurance, office expenses, year over year, they're about the same. Sometimes fuel and repairs are not thought of as overhead because adding acres adds to the expense. But I include them as overhead because they don't increase costs on a per acre basis like inputs do. For example, a farm's fuel bill might be on average $15 an acre, but adding 100 acres will not increase fuel by 15 times 100. It'll be a lesser amount due to trips to town for the mail, mowing grass, taking kids to hockey, personal use. It's better to capture them in overhead. Here's an example of how volatile overhead costs can be, though, on a per acre basis. Let's look at a 3,000 acre farm that could handle an additional 700 acres at $70 an acre rent without adding any equipment. The major expenses here, loans and insurance and so forth, don't increase when we add acres, as long as the additional capacity exists. The expenses that do increase by adding the acres, land rent, fuel, repairs, and labor, comes out to about $71,000 additional expenses. But when we add that to the $646,000 already included in overhead to get to $717, divided by the 3,700 acres that we're now farming, that is a reduction of overhead by $21.60 an acre. Overhead is a big deal. You may be thrown a number of $200 an acre to use in the program. I never trust a casually given number because maybe the farmer is throwing it out there and he doesn't want to admit that he doesn't know. Or he may have worked it out a few years ago and doesn't want to do the work again, or he just wants to move on. But as you can see in the examples I've just shown, is that overhead can easily affect a break-even price by a dollar a bushel. And overhead can change year over year. Was that $200 calculation done a couple of years ago? Well, costs probably changed. How many acres was it based on? They probably changed. So overhead is not that hard to do. It is 18 numbers. Most of these numbers you can get from last year's income statement and then just adjust them up or down depending on the fuel price change. Or maybe there is an acre change, and so you're going to make some adjustments. I do like to see loan payments broken down into principal and interest so that we have that difference between profit and cash surplus. After entering in the expenses for the overhead, you can see what the total is. In this case, $215. Well, is that a good number? That depends. To make a profit, you need to have an overhead number that is lower than contribution margin. Reminder, contribution margin minus overhead equals net profit. 10 years ago, I encouraged farms to be $150 an acre in overhead. Now I think they're doing really well if they're under $200 an acre. Farms below $200 an acre today, I sometimes suspect them of not being forthright in all of their numbers. Or they just have no debt and no rent. Most farms are between 200 and 250. Getting over 280 is a farm that needs good crops and prices every year. And they'll be frustrated with their cash flow and not able to grow. A farm over $320 an acre is a single crop failure away from financial hardship. Many farms have overheads that are high and they don't even realize it because they had some good years in the past and made money. But they can't understand why growth or even staying their current size is getting harder and harder and will blame land prices and input costs or something else. Taking the time to model your client's farm and getting the overhead right in Farmmaximizer is a worthwhile exercise. Talk about their efficiency as a farm. It will be appreciated, even though it takes some work to getting the info out of the farmer. And it should be revisited annually to remind the farmer what they are doing well and what they could work on. Entering the information into the program put in on an annual basis, and the program will divide it into the cost per acre. Land rent can be calculated from the crop budget like we did here with the crop share, or if you do a cash rent, but you can also enter in additional acres just with adding the plus. The little calendar icons are used for doing a monthly cash flow, which at this point I'm not going to go into and don't encourage it. You can expand and contract the expense details with the plus button. Import is a useful button to import the overhead from a previous year or another scenario. Once you've gone through a farm's overhead and you feel comfortable with it being complete, then I suggest you go up into the menu, update the overhead so that we turn it green, and we are assuring the program that this farm's overhead has been completed so that we can use it in farm benchmarks. I hope this helps you understand the importance of overhead and it's worthwhile getting your farm's numbers into their farm model. Thank you for watching.